Welcome to another Chef Knives to Go quick look product review. I am Steve Yamashin. What we have this time is the Yamashin White #1 Shidogami #1 Bunka 180mm knife. So this knife is an all-reactive knife. It has three-layer construction. The center hard core cutting edge steel is what's known as Shidogami or white paper #1, reactive high carbon steel. Heat treats in the 61 Rockwell range with that. The construction again, is three layers. On the outside of the hardcore cutting edge steel on either side, they've clad this with a reactive soft iron cladding. This iron cladding has what's known as a kuda-uchi or blacksmith finish on it, and it's a fairly smooth finish on this particular knife. And this also has looks to be some lacquer, food grade lacquer finish on it as well for a little bit of protection. As that wears off, the knife will start to stain as it normally would. So this is there's no stainless or semi-stainless on here. You need to keep it after you use it, clean it, dry it really well, and put it away, and don't leave it wet, and you will be fine. The weight and dimensions on these can vary a little bit from knife to knife. As you might see, for a Bunka, this is pretty tall, so it's a little different style. So this is 155 grams or 5.5 ounces. Edge length is about 174 millimeters or almost 7 inches on the edge. The overall length is about 12.3 inches or 313 millimeters. This is fairly thick at the handle coming out the back. You can see that. I measured it as about 3.94-ish millimeters here. You can see that's really thick right there, but then it thins up pretty darn quick. And then about halfway down the blade, I got about 2.25 millimeters of spine thickness. And then we've got that reverse sword tip on it. And you can see the turn there, which maintains that thickness. And it pretty much maintains that thick 2-ish millimeter thickness until you get to the grind. The grind is not super high on this, so it's fairly compressed. You can see it kind of goes quickly from, it's hammered down there and thins out a little bit. It goes pretty quickly from the blade flat part, boom, down to where it grinds and is ground down towards the edge. So in terms of the tip, it gets fairly thin right at the edge, but it doesn't do that until kind of at the last minute on there. Here's the back shot, what's called the choil, the back edge of the knife. Camera, there we go. So you can see we maintain a lot of thickness. Come on, camera. Until we hit the grind. It's a pretty good shot of that. The blade height, this is again tall, so I got about 55 millimeters on this, so it's a bit taller than most Bunka style knives. So definitely has some height to it. No problem with the finger clearance on the cutting board for just about anybody. The handle is an octagonal ambidextrous wood handle with walnut for the main wood and black packer wood for the ferrule. The glue up on this, they've got some gaps in there where they hammered it in. Into the, since it's a very large, kind of a thick tang. So I would put some kind of sealant on there. You don't want water getting in there, especially since it's not a stainless blade at all. So that tang could rust a little bit. So I would seal it up nicely with something. The circumference of the handle is about 75 millimeters or 3 inches where the two materials meet. Pretty standard for this size blade. They've done a fair amount of relieving some work on the right side of the blade where the choil meets the neck, and then a little bit on the left side of the blade, more on this side because I guess most people are right-handers. I am not, but it's got quite a bit more relief. You can see they've kind of filed that down right back here. Not as much on the left side of the blade. They've got a bit of a relief on the corners of the spine, so we're pretty comfortable out of the box on this. The out-of-the-box edge, I'll give it 4, maybe 5 out of 10. It's got lacquer on it, so sometimes that gets right down on the edge, and you can touch it up on a stone to kind of clean that up a little bit. It's kind of a quick edge on here. It doesn't have a lot of edge bevel to it, so I think they kind of threw a quickie edge on here. So I would say you'd probably want to just do a good quality full run sharpening job on this when you get it if you're a sharpener. If not, purchase the Chef Knives to Go finish sharpening service when you buy this, and they'll put a really nice edge on it that gives you a good reference point for sharpness, how sharp these things can get. And white #1 can get stinking sharp. It'll get as sharp as your skills allow. And also what kind of edge retention you would expect with a quality edge. So Shidogami #1 is super, super easy to sharpen. The edge retention isn't out of this world, but it's so easy to sharpen. It's kind of fun to sharpen it and keep that thing at peak sharpness all the time because it takes a quick run over the stones or strops or whatever you might have to keep this thing super sharp. So that's one of the great things about Shitogami number 1. It's super, super easy to sharpen. It'll make you feel like a sharpening champ. Some people make the mistake when they're trying to learn how to sharpen to buy a really cheap knife with super cheap steel, and the steel doesn't sharpen very well, and the knife just does not want to get sharpened. You get frustrated because it's hard to sharpen, and even if you're doing pretty well, the steel just does not want to take an edge very well. This steel will get super sharp very, very quickly. So highly recommend a good quality carbon steel if you're just learning to sharpen. It just makes life a lot easier. It makes you feel a lot better about what you're doing learning to sharpen. So other than that, this has a nice straight blade. The grinds are pretty clean. It's a bit cleaver-ish, as you can kind of tell here with the tip on it. It's pretty stiff as well. The fit and finish are, as I mentioned, pretty nicely done. Let's get our beauty shot on here. So you can see it's kind of a, part of that I think is the lacquer on here, but you've got some embossed kanji and symbol on the right side of the blade. It's a fairly smooth finish. Here's your blade road right here with the grind, and then there's your edge steel, your core steel peeking out there at the end. Here's the left side of the blade. Every blade's going to be a little different. It's got just a little bit of texture to it, but it's pretty smooth and a bit shiny there. Part of that is the lacquer on it. That will eventually wear off as you go. What else? Balance point. So the balance point on this blade is going to be fairly close to a pinch grip for me. So there's your balance point right there. And for me, pinch grip, that's pretty darn right on the money. So very neutral, nimble feel for this knife. Let's look at it on the cutting board. So this particular type of knife typically has not too much belly. It's got a very low tip in relation to the rest of the blade. This is exaggerated by how tall the blade is, but here's what this looks like. It actually flows into a bit of a flat at the back here, and a little bit, just a back bevel at the heel, and then you've got a very low tip. So you're not going to be doing this with it. You can rock that, maybe some chives, maybe some carrots, but that tip's going to dig in pretty darn quick on you. However, this will chop really well. It'll do great on tip draws, push-pull cuts, glide cuts, that kind of stuff. And then every profile is a little different. This one has a bit of a point right there, a fulcrum point, and then another one towards the back. It's not that hard to tweak the profile on these things and take just a tiny bit off and kind of adjust them a little bit if they're not 100% smooth to your liking. So, unique blade shape, fairly thin at the edge and the tip given the size of the blade and the thickness of it, but nice and stiff, interesting tall shape to it. This is the Yamashin Shitogami or white number 1 Bunka 180mm knife.